It's the Faith Middleton Show. I'm John Dankosky, sitting in for Faith today. Thanks so much for listening. Of course, you can check us out online at WNPR.org, where you can download podcasts of the show. When you walk into Dirt Floor Studio in Chester, Connecticut, it's like walking into a time machine that takes you back to a very different kind of music making. It's like a trip back to the late 60s, early 70s. Acoustic instruments, funky electronics, and a very laid-back vibe has all replaced the corporate computer-driven music studio of 2008. And the music that comes out of the studio sounds like it comes from a different time, too. It's richer, it's more open, and it's more handcrafted. Eric Lichter is the man behind Dirt Floor. He's a musician and a multi-instrumentalist who records his own music and the music of his friends and other musicians for his label at Dirt Floor. He joins us today. Eric, welcome to the program.
Hi, John.
So, Eric, what's your philosophy as a music producer, as you run Dirt Floor? What's your philosophy behind the type of music you're trying to make there?
I have it's a two-tiered philosophy. I make records. I don't make demos. That is sort of my battle cry, I guess. You know, if you want to do a demo, go somewhere else. I make albums. I make great albums for artists. And I want to keep the human element intact in those records. So they move and flow and breathe. And I want there to be a Dirt Floor sound. It's sort of something I found my niche in music, and that's it. Whether I die penniless as a result or, I'm successful, it doesn't matter. But that is my philosophy, just to make great, human, warm records for great artists.
And to have a certain sound, because I think the records do have a sound. You can tell they're made in a specific place with a certain type of instruments and with certain people.
The Dirt Floor sound.
That is a cool thing, to have a sound. I mean, there's not too many people who can say that there's a sound to what they do. And it's not just being a guitar player or writing songs or whatever. It's about a sound that you're creating. Yeah. So this is interesting. Now, on your website, you actually you boast really about not using computers to make music. Why is this such a big deal for you?
I just don't believe that they have a place in music making, in real music making. I'm not talking about the hit machine, that exists out there nowadays. I believe that there should be limitations. When you have limitations, it forces you to be more creative. And when you have limitless tracks to work with, the creativity sort of goes out the window.
Limitless tracks mean on a computer you can just add as much as you want all the time. And
absolutely. And you can fix things that are wrong, that are imperfect. You can make perfect. If your voice is flat, it can repair that and make it perfect. It's really a wonderful thing, when used for good, but mostly nowadays it's used for evil, and it must be stopped.
Used for evil. So the opposite, what you try to do is try to make music that's from scratch that includes, I guess, some of the mistakes, the things that people just do as humans, right?
The human element being intact. And I use Tom Waits and Neil Young as examples. And now, had they used Pro Tools, and it's not about Pro Tools, but had Tom Waits used...
And explain what Pro Tools is. It's a music program that allows you to, on a computer, have as many tracks as you want, do editing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a computer program. I don't know too much about it because obviously I don't have it. But you're looking at these files, these waves on a screen, and you can manipulate them with the click of a mouse.
It's like doing word processing almost with music in a way.
It's not hands-on. Working with a mixing board is like playing an instrument. It's an instrument itself. But had Tom Waits used it on Closing Time, for instance,
classic record from the 70s,
wouldn't be talking about it, I don't think, now. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be a Touchstone or Harvest.
The great Neil Young classic. And again, these albums you're talking about are very acoustic. They have this sort of human element to them. And they're recorded on real tape. Around here at the radio station, we used to use real tape, reel to reel. We don't do that anymore, right? It all goes into computers. What does that bring, these old machines you use to record the music?
There's a warmth to tape that can't be captured using any other form. Using it for radio or other things is a great thing, and that's when computers actually work. For music making, I don't believe it does because the warmth is lost, that feeling of being right there with the artist.
Eric Lichter is our guest, and he runs Dirt Floor Studio. He's a musician himself, and he records artists for his label, Dirt Floor, and we'll be hearing about some of the artists in just a moment. So how do you capture some of this warmth? Besides just the equipment that you use, how do you go into a recording session and say, I want to create this warmth of music and not a cold sound?
Well, what I do first and foremost is try to put the artist at ease. So I like to have a meeting with the artist beforehand so they could get to know me and I get to know them, and when they come in to record, we're completely comfortable rather than cold coming in and starting, because there's an awkwardness that you can't get past sometimes, especially when dealing with artists. And then I basically tell them, listen, this isn't brain surgery here. It's music, and if the song is good, the song is gonna be good. And, let those human elements shine through. Leave those little moments along the way, those human elements. And in my life as a kid, I remembered on Harvest, there's a song on that album called Are You Ready for the Country? There's a point 3/4 through the song where the drummer, Kenny Buttry, actually messes up the drum time, reverses it, and then catches on and then starts playing. They left it in there, and it's the part I wait for every single time. It's this imperfection that you wait for. It's like that stop along the way.
But so many musicians would say, but look, if I had a chance to go back and fix that huge error I made, if I had a chance to go back and really make it right, I've been practicing all this time and I'm going to put it on record, shouldn't I make it right?
That's up to them, ultimately. And I do have people who want it to be pristine. And I have to do that, ultimately, as a business owner. But when I'm creative and they ask me to put my fingerprints all over their masterpiece, their craft, then, it's definitely a meeting of the minds. I'm not an engineer. And a normal engineer is supposed to sort of not put their fingerprints on anything in a recording studio. And that's why I'm not an engineer. I'm not a knob twirler. Like, I get dirty with the artist. I roll my sleeves up. I say, okay, here's what we're going to do.
Do you ever have artists who come in and are used to someone who kind of just stays back a little bit more?
A lot of them. A lot of them do. And I ask them to play me what they've gotten done before. And it's been underwhelming. It's very sterile, very pleasant, I suppose, but it doesn't have that thing that grabs you. And I've made about 30 records so far for people out there in the world. And people are enjoying those records. And I'm so proud of every single one. That's, I think, the thing. I won't let anybody leave without their album being amazing. For them and for me. I think that's a pretty important thing. That's integrity, I think, and we pull things apart, put them back together, and it's surpassed everybody's expectations. Because they're like, wow, I wasn't going to do that, but listening to it, it sounds right. Or I'll take people out of their comfort zone, like with Laura Meyer, this artist we worked with. She's never really played the electric guitar before, and we had a slide part in mind for this song, and so I put the guitar in her hand, and I was like, play it. And it couldn't be done any other way.
Well, let's hear a little bit from Laura Meyer. This is music recorded at Dirt Floor Studio in Chester, Connecticut by Eric Lichter, our guest here on The Faith Middleton Show.
He was like an earthquake, and she was like the rain. Every hole that he she would fill up again. He made his share of mistakes, and every time she forgave him, till the day finally came when there was nothing left worth saving. She said, I'm no longer coming down from these clouds. Of course he didn't expect the sudden change of events.
That's music by Laura Meyer. It's a song called Clouds, and it's from the label Dirt Floor Records, recorded at Dirt Floor Studio in Chester, Connecticut, by Eric Lichter. He's a multi-instrumentalist and a composer himself, and he's the producer of many recordings at this very funky little studio in Chester. I'm John Dankosky, sitting in for Faith Middleton today. Eric Lichter joins us. A beautiful song. She's a beautiful voice, doesn't she?
She really does, you know. She came in and we, in fact, made her album in about a week's time. And I like to work fast. I don't believe in, taking 5 hours to make a drum kit. I really like to work quickly and get the essence down.
You can hear a lot of the humanity in the music. The thing that struck me was you don't hear the sound of the guitar so much as you hear the sound of the guitar being played by hands.
Yeah, it's not ham-fisted, that's for sure. I think it comes from growing up listening to music with headphones. And my two earliest memories ever musically were the first Crosby, Stills and Nash record, You Don't Have to Cry. That song just still gives me chills. And Elton John, Someone Saved My Life Tonight. I just remembered going, wow, there's something about this stuff. I need to know what's happening here. And when I put headphones on, I can hear every little nuance.
And that's part of the style of production that comes from the 1970s. All those records that have influenced you, really, people did listen with headphones on. They listened very closely for these little things. You add a lot of your own touches to all this music. You play a lot of the instruments that are on these records, right?
Yeah, like, for instance, that Laura Meyer track. She came in and pretty much played the acoustic guitar and sang and some piano. And I don't think she'd mind me saying this, because she's brilliant. And she pretty much handed it over to me and said, listen, let's do this thing. So it was like a collaboration. There were moments where I would sort of say, why don't we take this bridge and shift the time? Or why don't we put this ARP synthesizer on there? And she was like, ooh, I don't know, synth? But I was like, it's okay. It's from the 70s. Pete Townsend used ARP synths, so it's okay. So there's a lot of collaboration. And I don't work with bands. That's the other thing. I don't really allow them to come in.
You don't let bands come in? Why not?
No, I've had a few funky experiences because you're dealing with a lot of personalities. And, I really like to deal with the artist. It's just one of those things, one musician's hard enough sometimes, having 5 of them at once. It's really difficult.
How did you collect all of this remarkable vintage equipment that you have? It really is like a little museum of the 60s and 70s.
I've been recording since I was a kid, and I was never happy with anything I got down. And I'm 37 now. I would go to a studio, and it never sounded like me. So I would just start to buy little bits and pieces, living in Los Angeles and New York, and start to accumulate things. And I'd have to get U-Hauls eventually to just,
move
drag
stuff
it
around, yeah.
Found this spot in Chester, and I just put down roots, and I started to record my stuff, and then other people wanted me to record their stuff. And
all these great old instruments, and the tape deck that you use, a lot of I know the instruments and the different pieces of equipment have stories behind them. Who used to own them?
Yeah, that tape deck is a Scully 284, and it was owned by Leon Russell.
Explain to people who don't know who Leon Russell is.
Well, he was a very successful writer. He had the Carney album, which is the album that this machine was used on, and I actually just found the vinyl, and it's amazing.
I'm up on the tiny road, one side safe, one is home. The circus game can be. I'm up on the tiny wire, think by life and the funeral pyre, but ain't got no show you can see. Wine seems to be the only place for me. If I'm a deal, if ever let 'em fall, back around my neck around, you look into my band. Well, maybe you're just too blind to see. I'm up in the spotlight.
He's played with a ton of other musicians.
He wrote
over these.
Superstar. That Carpenters and everyone else song. He wrote that, co-wrote that with Bonnie Bramlett.
And of course, so he's one of these sort of pseudo stars of the 60s and 70s, making records and writing songs. And you've got his piece of equipment.
I have this machine, and I can't even imagine what was done on that machine. But he was the guy with the long flowing beard and the long hair, and he was like the resident keyboard player with George Harrison and all these guys. And it breaks all the time.
It breaks all the time?
All the time.
Eric Lichter is our guest. He runs Dirt Floor Studio in Chester, Connecticut. This is the Faith Middleton Show. I'm John Dankosky, in for Faith. Now, you record your own music there, and your wife's a musician as well, and you've recorded her music there. You've got some new music out now. We were actually talking beforehand. You sort of slipped and said, it's going to come out like someone else is going to do it. But no, you're putting this music out pretty soon yourself, right?
Yeah, I am. It'll be out by the fall, and I have one album out so far called Corduroy, which came out a few years ago. But yeah, there's some new stuff coming out.
And so for people who don't know anything about your music, Talk a little bit about your music. Who influences you? Some of these same folks who we've been talking about?
This is hard because I'm influenced by so many things. And I'm not a music snob. I mean, I guess I am, but I'm going to say it right here. This is great. Dan Fogelberg has influenced me tremendously. And it breaks my heart that he's so underrated and that he passed away.
A lot of people like Dan Fogelberg.
I know. But a lot of folks, younger than me or, even my own wife. But his 70s output was brilliant. And I love Lowell George, who's one of my heroes, and I love Beck and Elliott Smith, and there's this new group called Fleet Foxes, which blow my mind.
It's not just all music that you care about that's from the 1970s.
Absolutely not. But I like people who have that, like Jack White, for instance, from the White Stripes and the Raconteurs. I mean, he has the same recording philosophy. And Ryan Adams. There's just a philosophy, and I just don't like to listen to things that hurt my ears.
Well, let's hear a little bit of music. Your song is called Home Fires. This is Eric Lichter on The Faith Middleton Show. That's music from our guest Eric Lichter here on the Faith Middleton Show on WNPR. I'm John Dankosky, sitting in for Faith. A very nice song, and as we were talking before, wouldn't be out of place on a Neil Young record like Harvest.
I was telling Lori, I guess you can't really run too far from the influences. I try to just go so far and do these funkified, strange, Prince-like things, with synthesizers, and then I just come back to it because it's comfortable for me to do. Yeah, but I rebelled. I mean, I love heavy metal, too. Like metal with a hard T. Not the stuff that they call metal now, but like Black Sabbath, Maiden, Judas Priest. Like, I can play and sing every note of every song of those people, Ronnie James Dio. And so I'm definitely not a lightweight. but I gravitate towards the Jackson Browns. Late for the Sky, I think, is probably my favorite all-time album ever.
We have just a little bit of time left, Eric. Do you think people put too many limitations on what they listen to? Because I think a lot of people say, I'm really into this kind of music, and they don't want to listen to something else.
It's a fashion now. That's the shame. Music is something you wear and let other people see you wearing because it's cool. Now, secretly, these people will say, oh, well, the Carpenters are my guilty pleasure. Well, why? They're awesome. They should just be awesome. Let them just be.
Well, if you live in our listening area and you've got some music that you want to record, a really good place to do it is Dirt Floor Studio. It's really been a pleasure to talk with you about the work that you do at Dirt Floor Studio and some of your music. Eric Lichter, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, John.
The Faith Middleton Show airs 3 to 4 daily. For a repeat of the program or for a